La vida. Yeah, all right.
Hey, the first hike is starting down at the kiosk. You can take yourself away from the music, see the guys in the yellow shirts. Have fun.
Everybody that would like to go on the walk, 12:45 walk is kind of here now. Okay, we all set? If you need bug spray, there's some bug spray over here. Please apply some bug spray if you wish. The walk is about 1 hour long. It's going to be at a gradual pace. Few ups and downs. This is a hill, but it shouldn't be too bad for people. This walk here is going to be done by a gentleman whose name is David Weed. He's very knowledgeable on the indigenous people of Rhode Island. But one thing we're going to be concerned with is the Soam Nation. And David's going to talk to you out there about the customs and the lifestyles of the indigenous people as they apply to this hill and how they may have reacted to the hill here. David Weed, thank you for coming to Neutaconkanut Hill and the Conservancy's event today.
I'm Dave Weed. I'm the coordinator of the Soames Heritage Area, SOWAMS. If you live in Barrington, you hear that name all the time because we've got Soames Road, Soames School. If you live in Warren, you hear that when you look up the town hall. It says Soames, 1621. Anybody tell me who used to live in Soames? I'll give you a clue. He met the Pilgrims in 1621 in Plymouth. No, not quite Columbus. That was a little before. Who else? The Massasoit. Anybody hear that? Massasoit? Okay, this big statue in Plymouth of the Massasoit. Okay, his name was Osa Mequin. Osa meaning yellow, Mequin meaning feather, yellow feather. That was his name. His title was the Massasoit, like the president, because he led over 60 tribes in all throughout southeastern, what's today Massachusetts, all the way up to the Charles River. Okay, so Osa Mequin was concerned about his survival because he had lost over 90% of his population, his people along the coast of Massachusetts between 1616 and 1619 due to one reason. Anybody know? Why would 90% of his people die? Disease brought over by the European traders before the Pilgrims arrived. And those diseases, and we don't know exactly what they are, but infectious diseases could have been measles, it could have been smallpox, it could have been typhus, it could have been bubonic plague, it could have been all of those. But what we do know, because we have eyewitness accounts, was that a population of tens of thousands of people along the coast were dead in 3 years. So when the Pilgrims arrived in 1620, they found nothing but bleached bones on the ground. And Tisquantum, who had been captured by the English, taken to England, and then came back speaking English, walked into his village and found everyone he knew was dead. Imagine if that happened in your town. Well, the Pilgrims took it as a sign from God that God had prepared them the way, because here they had a village that was all cleared and ready to occupy. Of course, that was in December of 1620, a terrible winter. They spent most of the time on the ship, and half of the Pilgrims died over that winter. But by March of the following year, when Osa Mequin determined that he wouldn't die if he came there from whatever the cause was. No one knew what infectious disease was. But thinking that he would be safe, he came and he brought 60 of his warriors and walked from Soames. Where's Soames?
In Massachusetts.
Barrington, Warren, and Bristol, that area there. And actually, if you look at the map inside your brochure, you'll see that Somme stretches all the way from Providence and Neutaconkanut Hill all the way down to the southern tip of Bristol, because that was the area occupied by not the Wampanoag, the name you always hear, but by the Pokanoket tribe. That was the tribe of the Massasoit. They were told after the King Philip War, you couldn't call yourself Pokanoket or we'll shoot you. So they stopped saying that, okay? But that's the tribe who the Massasoit wanted to protect because he had the Narragansetts. Anybody know where the Narragansetts were?
The Narragansett?
Yeah, Narragansett, right. Southern Rhode Island, okay. But they had moved into the Providence area by 1620. They had already occupied this area, Neutaconkanut Hill and all of the Providence area, which is why it was so easy for them to give it to Roger Williams in 1636, because it wasn't traditional land for them. But in any case, what the Osamequin, the Massasoit, was concerned was that they would want to move into his territory, particularly since his tribe had been so weakened by that disease. So he met with them and struck a treaty. It's called the Wampanoag Treaty, misnamed, it's the Pokanoket Treaty of 1621. And that treaty was an agreement between the English people and the native population that they would not only not harm one another, but they would protect each other from their common enemies, and they needed that. That treaty ensured the survival of the English for the next 50 years here. And if it weren't for that treaty, I would be speaking Dutch or French or Algonquin. Think about it. Okay, Sean's gonna, he knows the trails here, and he's gonna lead us in the first segment here. Try to stay as close together as you can, but I'm gonna shut up until we find another place to talk. Okay? Thanks.
Recently, he'll tell you in the back, Rob had discovered an even larger oak. We'll go by it. It's off the trail. It's something you would have to venture down into a little gully to find. But for years they thought this was the biggest oak. I can't take a guess at how old. I want to wait for Rob to catch up because he has a little more. Highest point in Providence, so it's very susceptible to wind and storms and lightning being this high up. So you'll see a lot of downed trees in the forest. So
This is the hidden swamp. You look down, it's low land here, and even though you don't see water here, there's water very close under the surface there. And in swamps, you get certain kinds of trees. I don't know if you have some cedar growing here, but that's a typical swamp plant. Swamps were very important to the natives. They would use them in the wintertime because the water would freeze and you could walk through them easily. But in the summertime, when the water was not frozen, they were terrific places to hide, in particular, hide from the English, particularly during the King Philip War. You had British militia troops chasing you, head into a swamp, because the native people didn't worry about the water, and they knew those swamps like the back of their hand, like Sean knows these here. And they could go in and hide there, and the British would get totally perplexed, okay? Anybody hear of the Great Swamp Fight in southern Rhode Island? That occurred during the King Philip War in December of 1675. It was a similar swamp and hideout encampment, if you will, for the Narragansett tribe. And when the British determined that the Narragansetts were fighting on the side of the Pokanokets against them in the King Philip War, they decided that they would go down and fight them, and found them over 600 men, women, and children in this encampment in the middle of a swamp. What did they do? They surprised them in the middle of the night, burned the encampment to the ground, and killed anybody who was trying to run away. That was known as the Great Swamp Massacre. That act alone propelled to go after the English. So when you think of swamps, think of safety and think of massacres. Okay? Any questions? Otherwise, we'll move on. We're stopping here at this boulder. It's very difficult to tell how this boulder got here, but it could be one of dozens of what are called glacial erratics. Remember, 12,000 years ago, where you're standing now, there was 3/4 of a mile of ice above your head. Okay, this is a huge glacier. The glacier was so big, it went down past Block Island. Okay, there was no Narragansett Bay. There was no Providence, obviously. There were no rivers, at least here. But when the glaciers started melting 12,000 years ago, they receded. They pulled back from the area and opened the land. And that's the first time that we know of that human beings ever occupied this space here, because they moved into the land from the south and followed the coastline as the ice receded, as the trees grew, as the animals came in here. But when those glaciers pulled back, they had been carrying what to a glacier, a mile-high glacier, this rock is a pebble, like a little bit of sand you might get in your shoe. There's nothing for glaciers to move a rock of this size. But when it melted, it didn't take the rock back with it to Canada. It simply left the rock where it dropped, okay? So you'll see rocks like this, large rocks, some of which geologists have found did come from Canada, that far away, okay? And then they were deposited here for no particular reason. But that's a glacial erratic, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them as we go along. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, that's
Sean?
about it. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So a quick bit of history that's not native is this boulder right here. Every fragment you see was once part of beyond enormous stone, and it was perched right there, and all the trees were pretty scarce going down to Plainfield Street, so they thought it was at risk of tumbling, so they exploded it. But the WPA, which was after the war, when they were trying to put everybody back to work, they're mainly responsible for a lot of these trails. There's a photo of them, and there's about 15 grown men, and there's still space for maybe a dozen or so more. That's how large that rock was. You go a little bit further, on the horizon, you can actually see the Newport Pell Bridge. Now, with the eyesight, it's just two little nubs. With a view camera, you can actually see the whole lit up bridge. Now, that's one of the main reasons that the natives chose this as a location, because they were able to keep an eye on friend and foe, because they could see so far in every direction. Because keep in mind, in their time, this forest had little to no trees. They would ground burn a lot of it for the purpose of keeping the view. So if you ever come back around here and you want to take that little venture out right past those boulders, you can see the horizon and you can see all the way to Mass. It's quite a view. But two little black dots would be the Newport Pell Bridge that you're seeing. But they used to have cattle and whatnot, so where you see these random stone walls on the hill was just to stop their cattling from wandering off into the forest. So. Do you know the cemetery on Hartford Avenue, the historical one? That's actually where this family is buried, because all that land used to actually be the hill. But before it got preserved, they started, constructing.
Going that way.
It here was with runners, okay? These were young native men who could run great distances on this kind of a trail. They were known to traverse as much as 100 miles in one day. So Osamequin could get a runner to go up to Plymouth, 40 miles away, and back in one day to give them a message.
Right in the middle of the
And we think we've got it great with our wireless communication, okay? These guys knew how to travel. The other thing they would do is send smoke signals up on high mountains, Neutaconkanut being one of them, but also Mount Hope in Bristol, and there's a hill in Rehoboth as well. There were mountain hills all the way up to Mount Wachusett in Massachusetts. And by lighting a signal fire on top of those mountains, other tribe members could get signals almost instantly, okay? Think about that for modern communication. The next time your cell phone doesn't work. Okay.
You guys want to see how long you come? I'll show you the hike we've done. So you were able to see most of the part that does not have really extreme elevation. So we started up here at the summit ledge. Right here is where we entered the park. I'll let them catch up, kind of show, because you guys did quite a hike. We did the whole orange. Right here is where the oak tree was in the bridge, and the gentleman asked about the runoff river, which connects to right here. We cut up the blue to the hidden swamp, came all the way here to the exploded boulder, down here to where the King Monument that we just saw. Now we're right back here, and we're going to cut to the shortcut, which brings us right back to where the festival's happening. So I have one more location to show you here. David has one other to show you that's along the way, and then it's a straight shot out, okay?
This is the last talking stop we're going to do on the trail. What you see behind me are some rocks that are in a vertical position. This marks one of the places that we know there were meetings among 4 tribes. The Massachusetts to the north and northeast, the Nipmucks to the north and northwest, the Narragansetts, southern Rhode Island today, and the Pokanoket, who occupied southeastern Massachusetts today. Okay? Yes. Those 4 tribes would meet here and have hold council, where the chiefs would come to agreements about different uses of the land. We often hear that the English, the Pilgrims, would have treaties and buy land. Okay, you remember that Roger Williams in 1636 bought land from Canonicus here. But we all think, what a raw deal for the native people. They'd get like 32 pounds, which might translate to several hundred or even $1,000 or more today. But would you pay $1,000 for the whole city of Providence today? Yeah. Not a chance, okay? So what they would have are what's called usufruct or use agreements, saying you can hunt here, you can fish there, you can use this river for transportation. Those are the kinds of agreements that the tribes had with one another. So when the English wanted to have agreements, what we call treaties or land sale documents, they thought that was the same deal, and they would have exchange a gift, which was a common practice to exchange a gift when you did something like that. But it wasn't payment, because the native people never thought you could own land. Who owns the land?
Mother Nature.
Thank you. Mother Nature or God, or however you want to think about it. No people ever owned land before the arrival of the Europeans. So today we mark this spot as a great place of mutual meeting, which helped the tribes get along with one another. Any questions? Okay, we'll head back then.
For a while I was working
Are we going back?